big shout out if anyone's from KZN. I'm from KZN. I came down here to have a shower. I believe there's still no water at my home. But to all our KZN athletes, clubs, and that, our heart goes out. The devastation, as I say, been driving around where I could drive around, and it's absolutely devastating. So our heart goes out to everyone in KZN, and especially our sporting fraternity. There's a lot of damage for infrastructure with sport. And I know that some of our athletes and officials have lost lives in KZN. But welcome, and just a bit of context with SASCOC with safeguarding. I did see Patience join us, so I'll mention her just now. How safeguarding fits into SASCOC. We have our safeguarding commission, and there's two parts to that. And the one part is your policy and education commission, where we look at policy and education. It's obviously our courses and etc. and how we can improve. And then the other part of it is our case management panel, which is made up of experts that are there to assist us and guide the board if there's any, because we're not experts at safeguarding. We have to call on experts to assist us. So that's where we fit in. And then I mentioned Patience, Miss Patience Rukambana from SASCOC. I'm sure you all know Patience. She's actually our safeguarding officer for SASCOC. So that's where Patience fits in. But, I don't know how many of you have seen the SASCOC safeguarding policy. It's the basic strategic framework for safeguarding in the country. All national federations should have their policy in place, which will go down to provincial federations, districts, and then obviously club level, especially where we're sitting tonight. I think there's a little bit of a hiccup in the room, and that, if I'm going to be completely honest, there's a lot of federations that actually still haven't submitted their safeguarding policies to SASCOC, which is an issue, and we are addressing. So I'm sure all of you sitting in this room, you're here because you understand safeguarding. But down to club level, if we look at clubs, it's the backbone of sport in our country. Our athletes are basically day in, day out, is at the clubs. So if we can address safeguarding and have a look where we can make a difference in sport, it is at that club level. So what is SASCOC's expectations about it is if we can drive safeguarding from the club. If we look at policy, it's so easy for us to sit at the top and put policy down, and a lot of the people are sitting at the bottom. They don't understand it, they don't see it, they just want to get on. I would say the majority are volunteers. Actually, I'm convinced that at least 95% are volunteers. So we need the clubs and safeguarding to work, and the understanding of safeguarding. And when we're talking safeguarding, I'm sure Mark and Nat and Guardian have covered with you. It's obviously not just the one we all discuss, which is the abuse that takes place in sport, but it's the overtraining, it's the anti-doping, it's all the other aspects of safeguarding, the harassment, your bullying, victimization. That takes place, a lot of it at club level. And that's where we need our safeguarding, if we can get it stronger. And one thing we've learned over the last year, and our commission was discussing it, our Policy and Education Commission, is to drive safeguarding downwards from the top down. It's not making the impact. We have to drive it from the grassroots up. So we need to get it out there. And the only way we're going to get it out there is with people such as yourselves, at clubs. I just want to stop there. If you want any questions or thing, and if I don't see hands or Mark doesn't see hands, please just shout. I don't mind you interrupting. I don't want to give you a slideshow presentation. Everyone might fall asleep at this time of the night. So we're just going to talk through it. So just to go back to the clubs, if we can make a difference and have that and get that knowledge of what is happening with safeguarding at clubs, it will make a massive impact, not only for our athletes, for our coaches, for our technical officials. So it's really important. Just out of interest, and you can just give thumbs up and that, how many of you have safeguarding awareness at club level? Or is it just not happening? Is it, just a thumbs up or a thumbs down or whatever reactions you've got on your Zoom there? It's just important to see, because if we don't get it right, we've got to shift the way we're thinking them and how we're going to train and educate. So, and look, Mark mentioned it, I am in a federation. I'm fully aware of the difficulty in rolling out safeguarding. I see some thumbs, so that's actually a good sign. Fully aware of the difficulty in rolling out safeguarding right down at the ground level. as I mentioned before, volunteers. I'm a volunteer, just like all of us. It's very, very time consuming. We're under a lot of strain just in life these days. So to roll it out is not easy. And I know that we always talk about a male safeguarding officer, female safeguarding officer, or DSO, and the terminology, and it's so difficult to find that. And I must be honest, and Mark will smile at this, when I did I think it was a DSO course, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, I walked away. It was a weekend. It was right in the beginning when we first started out, and I went to do my federation to do my DSO. And on the end of the second day, I said, I don't know if I want to do this. This is scary. And I think, and that was it. It's huge. The responsibility of safeguarding, you realize the responsibility that lies within all of us in this space. And as I say, I'm going to use the word scary because it was scary. And especially when you start talking all the legal aspects, my mind was like, oh, I don't understand this legal stuff. What am I going to do? How am I going to do it? And then I thought, no, it's just the basics. It's just our duty of care. And when I just rattled it back down to the duty of care, I think that was the key aspect, for clubs. And I know that the Guardian and others that are presenting courses, a lot of them are giving you posters and that to put around your club. And I think that's just the key aspect of what we, and there's not a huge expectation on clubs. The only expectation is, I think we're just going to simplify it, that duty of care. Let's look after everyone in sport. And if we can just keep that basic in mind, it'll make a huge difference. I'm reading about a lot of anti-doping cases with youngsters at the moment. And to be honest, a lot of it's happening through supplements, going into the stores and buying the supplements off the shelves. We all know it's an unregulated industry. And that's also our duty of care, just to say to the kids, with supplements and that, just understand that you're responsible. What you put in is your mouth. You, the athletes, is responsible. And nobody wants to be banned from a sport because they've gone into a store and bought something off the shelf. With regards to, we all on clubs, we all operate off WhatsApp groups, or these days Telegram groups, or whatever's happening. It's important, especially if we've got our youngsters at that level, just to understand, the basics and the principles of keeping our youngsters safe in those groups, and anything happening. So, as we said, it's just to use our common knowledge and that on what we're going to do with safeguarding the kids, which then brings us, into the tours. I go away on quite a few tours with kids because I've done the courses. I don't know who that is. Maybe someone can mute them. And if we look at cases that we're aware of in SASCOC, we're not aware of every single safeguarding case. Not everything has been reported to us, but as we become aware of it, a lot of these cases are happening on the tours. I mean, when you're doing a tour, it's an overnight. As soon as you're going on an overnight, that is a tour. So, and I would say that on an expectation point of view, I think there's more with that. And I really want to drive this part home. When we go on tours, we've got to have management or responsible adults that are going on tours with our youth, our disabled, and any athlete that has done a course. At probably a designated safeguarding officer course at that level, to understand their responsibilities and the risk involved with taking kids away. And to understand, I don't know what Mark and that term it, but I term it my risk assessment to going on a tour. And when you start doing these risk assessments, you realize how much is involved. So if we're going in a bus and a taxi, it's simple things, going around and just checking the tire wear before we go. Your rooming list, have you got accommodation? Do the guardians, the parents, or anyone involved know where we're all staying for the night? Have we got backup on our cell phones? Should we break down somewhere? Are the kids aware of where we're staying? Have they got an emergency? I know Mark spoke to the Safeguard app. Have the kids got it downloaded? Have they got data? Not all our kids that travel have the fancy cell phones and data and that. Have we made a provision for data, or has the coach got a Wi-Fi dongle that at least 10 people can join to? It's all those aspects on a tour that we as sports people, and I'm talking more in the practical sense here, that we need to do. So, from a SASCOC perspective, we would just, and I'm talking to club levels, so it's more provincial and club, it would just be, that's what we would really like to see. a more thought process. And I mean, I know this because I see it every day in sport. We are so busy that tours are thrown together literally overnight, and they come together and we all go and everyone has a fantastic time. But we've got to go back a step and have that thought process going into it, and what we do, and to look after it. And as I said, it's not only the athletes. We're looking at the coaches. We're looking at the technical officials. I mean, I read a case recently about a hell of an abusive towards a technical official, and a thing. And what is our role? To look after those. We're battling to get people to become technical officials. We really are, because it's once again, it's volunteer. You got to do your exams. You got to do this. You got to do that. You go away, and then to get abused mostly by parents. So it's really important for us to look at the safeguarding as a whole. And as I said, the safeguarding we all hear and know about is obviously the sexual abuse. The more I want to say use the word violent approach to it, but it is bigger than that. As I said, overtraining, especially when you start getting to provincial and elite level. So from your clubs, we say, oh, we got provincial champs coming up, we got SA champs, and the kids are worried about schooling. Schooling is always first. Schooling must always come first. That we need to, and we watch that overtraining. I mean, I saw a case the other day of, I don't want to say which sporting code, and I was in a high performance gym in Durban, and this young girl was sitting there strapped up, and she was broken. And I looked at her and I said, sure, what's happened to you? And she said, no, she's injured, but she's got school and she's got provincial level and the club coach, and they got club champs. And this young girl was broken, and she's 18. And when I walked away, and I knew she was in good hands, her biokineticist was looking after her. But when I walked away, my first reaction was, that youngster will not be playing sport in a year's time. We're going to lose her to sport. And that is the overtraining aspect. And that is also a responsibility of ours as safeguarding. So, as I said, it's quite diverse. I'm trying to talk pretty general to it, just to give it an overview. But I think if we can start seeing those warning signs at that club level on those tours, and then just have an open communication with guardians and parents. If there are kids that aren't getting food and aren't eating and trying to train, it's the same thing. That's a safeguarding issue, and how we can help. And we've got the provincial sports confederations. We can talk to them, and basically what SASCOC is here with companies like the Guardian, and that is to hold your hand and help you, with safeguarding. So, Mark, I've been very general, so please come in here if you want to go more specific. As I said, just because I know that it's such a big subject of safeguarding. So please come in if there's anything you want to say.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. So Byron, I see your hand is up. Please keep it up, because as adult ADHD, I'll forget you put your hand up in a minute once I BT. So keep it up so I don't forget to get back to you. I just jotted down a couple of points as you were talking there, Kim, some really pertinent points. The first one you raised is, almost a question to the DSOs around who's doing safeguarding awareness. And I think for me, that is kind of a really grassroots but phenomenally powerful space, to the point, and it's possibly not something that we haven't thought about, but maybe it's something we need to expedite a bit. And maybe it would be something, and to put it out to the DSOs to kind of go, listen, safeguarding, maybe doing a webinar like this once a month for not coaches, not DSOs, but maybe for youth athletes. Let's give them the opportunity to hear what would be appropriate and what wouldn't be appropriate, but deliver it at that level. Maybe let's find out what is acceptable online behavior and not online behavior. And, the question, I suppose, then to the DSOs is going, if we put that to you as the DSOs of all of the clubs, do you think it would be valuable for you to go to your clubs and to say to all the moms and dads within your club, listen, next week, Thursday, we've got this person that's going to be speaking on these challenges? Would that be something that would interest you? And that's certainly something that we can pull together. And I don't want to do that survey right now, but just something to consider. Then another point you raised, Kim, just now was duty of care, which I think is something that we do need to definitely be giving focus to. I think that what has happened within the safeguarding of vulnerable persons in South Africa is that sport has played such a significant role in changing the landscape, because we have sat for very many years with arguably some of the best reactive legislation in the world. But proactively, we have been, as South Africa, we are terrible. I heard on the news yesterday that somebody is taking the presidency to court because of promises made in the GBV space, and they haven't come forward and they haven't delivered. And I think as South Africans, what we tend to do is we write legislation in terms of how we're going to address the perpetrator. But I think to Kim's point, bigger than that statute is the constitutional issue of duty of care. How do we actually stop the perpetrator from being somebody we have to catch, because we want to mitigate the thing from happening in the first in the first place? And that is where the power of the DSO really hits the tar. Then the other thing that you were talking about, Kim, and I suppose in the same duty of care, is in communicating to kids, we need to be aware that as adults, and as much as teenagers look at adults and go, really, what the hell do they know? They're old, they're dinosaur, our day, your day. We hear all of these comments. The reality is that very often our actions communicate so much more than our words. And if we're going to be saying to them, behave in this way, don't go down the road of, inappropriate substances, don't go down the road of inappropriate relationships, we really do need to communicate that through our actions and lead by example. And then I can't emphasize Kim's point enough, and I really did believe there'd be a lot more hands going up on this topic. But talking into that tour DSO, yes, we are all busy. Yes, we do get to a point, much like Kim said, where we go, you know what, guys, next week there's a tour, and what are we going to do, and who are we going to take? And I think we need to get to a point where club chairpersons are empowering the DSO so that when a decision is taken for an athlete to go, we very quickly identify the coach, we identify who's going to be part of the team, we'll identify the parents and mentors and chaperones, but we need to be going right in the very beginning, who's the DSO? Who's going to ask those questions that Kim was mentioning earlier? Who is going to, if we're outside of the country, hold on to the passports? Is there data? Does the driver have a PDP? Is the vehicle licensed? When we get there, where are we staying? How do we get from our accommodation to our competing venue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And the DSOs know to be asking those questions. We really do need to make them part of that initial planning phase, because they should be as important as the coach, because we would never arrive at a hockey tour and someone didn't take responsibility for making sure all the hockey sticks were there. Well, we should never arrive on any tour where a DSO hasn't made responsibility to ensure safeguarding is in place. And then the final one, and I think, Kim, you're probably hitting the nail on the head, Jeff, specifically from, I suppose, the cap you wear in the canoeing space, is that, being engaged in national sports, not just from the SASCOC perspective, is a consideration of, we're always looking at coaches, but one thing you mentioned was technical officials. And we need to be so aware of two things. Number one, they are arguably as much of a risk as a coach, but they are also as much at risk as a coach. And so we need to make sure that we formulate something that allows us to address all of that. So, I don't know if there's any comments out of what I have said, Kim, but I just wanted to touch on some of the points that you mentioned, because I think they're very, very valid. If you want to say anything, Kim, otherwise Byron's hand is up and find out what he has to ask.
Yeah, let's go to questions, because there is something I just want you touch on, Brian, but let's go through. Maybe we'll answer them with some of the questions.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. I'm from Tuck Sports, University of Pretoria. Kim, thanks a million for coming on and speaking to us. Kim, I'm currently, as I said, University of Pretoria Tuck Sports, so we have a lot of clubs within the university. And I'm also part of school governing bodies at a high school and a primary school. And the safeguarding issue for primary schools, high schools, and universities is very grey, because we know that the custodians of every sport is the national federations, filtering down to provincials, filtering down to clubs. So is it the responsibility of the national federations, or is it the responsibility of the school and university to make sure their sports codes and teachers and coaches and technical officials are safeguard or DSOs, or how does that work? Because that's very much a gray area. Because this is something like Mark said, sport has introduced a preventative legislation now, which is great. But we need to move it into the schools, because it doesn't sound like the Department of Education knows about safeguarding as yet. And the universities are aware of it. And we are trying to attack at the moment, try to get all our coaches all the way down to volunteer coaches qualified as DSOs and put a policy in place. But just to ask, from a SASCOC point of view, where do we go with schools and universities, please?
Thanks, Brian. Fantastic question. The university one's easy to answer. USA is one of SASCOC's members. So you will fall under it will be your overriding USA policy, which will allow a SASCOC, and then each university. So that's probably an easier one to answer. The huge grey area, schools. And you're quite right. It is majorly grey, and it's quite frightening. You know, our SASCOC policy speaks to the clearances, the 3 clearances every 24 months. You know, schools, I spoke to some school coaches and they got cleared when they started school, some of them 10 years ago, and have not been cleared since. So one thing we've discussed, and I see Patience is here, maybe she wants to come in and discuss this, but we are having talking with our Minister of Sport, Art and Culture to speak to the DOE. We have to allow the safeguarding. You know, I don't think I mean, I don't beat around the bush. If you know me, I'll go straight to the point. Look at the safeguarding cases in the press. The majority is school coaches. No checks done. No coach. Not only the checks on the clearances, but what level coaching? You know, how much are you paying those coaches to coach at school? So we are definitely in that space. You know, SASCOC is responsible for the International School Federation, ISF. So we feel it is our responsibility, but it's to get it through to the schools and to get it working. And it's a huge area where we're working on. But we need that interministerial level to assist us with it. But you know, when I speak to schools, I say, please just do your clearances. Check with the federations. We've got cases where coaches have been banned from the federation. They're suspended from coaching in the federation, and they're going to schools and they're coaching in the schools. Nobody's checking. That means they're not even doing reference checks, because if they're doing the reference checks, they would have picked it up. So it's really critical, and that's why we're saying, I love talking I talk the nuts and bolts, the people involved on the ground level like yourself, because if we can start getting that message through to schools, we can make a difference to help protect our kids, because there certainly is a problem with school sport in South Africa. Hope that helps.
It does help. May I make a recommendation maybe for SASCOC?
Yes.
Going the ministerial level is obviously the right way to go. Have SASCOC considered maybe speaking to the governing body and foundations? There are governing body associations in the country that look after school governing bodies, and maybe speaking to them to help the school set up their policies would also be a good idea.
Byron, Kim at sascoc.co.za, if you can send me that and information, we can certainly, I mean, that's why we're saying this is great to have this interaction. We're happy, because we have to start spreading the word with the school sports. It's a huge grey area in sport.
Will do, thank you.
Byron, just to touch on that, I think just to give it the context, sports was 4 years ago where schools are today. Sport has had to up their game, because they're going to be called on that to compete internationally. There are 80, 90 federations in South Africa, and getting it down from the top down, we don't need to legislate it, we can policy it. Yes, in time it would be best to legislate it. Within schools, 33,000 schools in South Africa, each of them independently driven by a headmaster. Yes, one can argue that DOE does hold the reins, but the reality is that DOE needs to address the legislation. And unfortunately, there isn't any. So what I'm seeing happening in the schools we're working in is that schools are having to, those that choose to go down that road are choosing to go down that road. At the end of May, just to give that a little bit of context, as you may know, DOE, Department of Education, SASCOC, independent schools, the independent schools it's got a independent schools conference at the end of May down in Cape Town at the waterfront, and I'll be addressing the heads of every single school in the independent space and giving them the ability to choose this. I think, from Kim's side and the ability to, just have the discussions at government level, countries around the world with proactive legislation have significantly lower crimes against children than those that just have reactive legislation. And so we're putting in the proactive stuff, but right now it's by choice. I think if we can legislate it, that would absolutely be amazing. So, really good, powerful question. Thank you. Eric.
Good evening, everybody. I have a question.
Where are you from, Eric?
I'm from Swimming, Cape Town
Yeah.
Aquatics. I just want to know, I know, Mark, you've been dealing a lot and mentioning this quite often, with regards to the importance of a DSO. Now, my question is, has that actually been sent to federations where it's made compulsory when they go on tours to have somebody or a designated officer? Is it compulsory that you must have one, or can they still go on tour without one?
So if I can, Kim, I'm sorry. One thing I know, so in January, shame, Kim did it again, but it was the third meeting with presidents around the country. And one of the challenges that Kim has got is that federations should have drafted their safeguarding policy by now. Yes, the SASCOC policy does talk into safeguarding on tours, it does talk into that. And so, yes, there is a need to get it done, but we need to be aware of the reach of SASCOC, the legislative reach of SASCOC. And so SASCOC can, via policy, cause federations to draft their policy, and their policy should dictate that somebody is responsible for safeguarding at the clubs and somebody is responsible for safeguarding on tour. The question one would need to ask, like if I use you, Eric, as an example, is what does your swimming policy say? If your policy 100% aligns to the SASCOC policy, then the answer your first question, then there is policy dictating that to happen. The next step, which comes directly after policy, is the appointment of persons who will police the policy and actually make it actioned. One of the challenges of safeguarding internationally that goes back probably the last 20 years is that very often in the safeguarding space, whether we're talking about municipalities, talking about schools, talking about sports, ticking the box of safeguarding has in the past meant the drafting of a policy, which ultimately ends up as a document in a lever arch file on the top shelf in some secretary's office. It's all good and well, and I can't talk into swimming, and I'm not going to talk into any specific federation. I'm only saying swimming because you mentioned swimming. And I'm using an example, I'm not saying it's the fact. Swimming may or may not, but let's for the purpose of this conversation go, swimming has got an amazing safeguarding policy. I'm not saying they do, I'm not saying they don't, but if we assume they do, the fact that you are asking me the question, does there need to be a DSO at a club and does there need to be a DSO on tour, is testimony to the fact that that safeguarding policy hasn't potentially been effectively communicated. And it is vital that those that are at grassroots level are aware and empowered to do what the policy dictates. I'm 100% certain that we're not on this forum going to name and shame federations that have submitted and haven't submitted. But Kim, would you be comfortable saying, because I know in our meeting in January you were very clear that many federations still hadn't submitted their policy, is that still the case, or is there more that have? And I'm not asking to name and shame, just kind of a yes and no.
No, I won't name and shame, but I mean, I'm happy to state that at least 50% of federations have not submitted their policy to SASCOC. And you're going to ask to stop the next question being asked, how are we addressing that? From right now, because we started a new financial year with grants, I'm sure you're all aware we all run to the 31st of March. If no federation has a safeguarding policy, they can't even apply for funding. So, and that's going right down to provincial level. So any grants and that, one of the key requirements, like you got to hand in audited financials, etc. The key requirement now going forward is safeguarding policy, and that we really are implementing right down, because that's somewhere we can say. But as Mark said, it's not only about having the policy, it's implementing it. Any piece of paper I can say there's my policy, but if grassroots aren't aware of it, and that's why these discussions are so important, because as I said, this is the working crowd. This is the crowd that works on the grassroots with our athletes, coaches, technical officials. So yeah, it is. Look, and I can speak from a SASCOC thing. So if we talk about the Olympic Games, or we're talking about the Oz Region 5 Games or Commonwealth Games coming up, no code manager, coach, they all go, they're all DSOs. They all have to pass and be designated safety officers. Even our athletes do the basic safeguarding awareness course, so that athletes are even aware what is safeguarding, what are my rights. And also it's important and for everyone to know what the rights are. Is for an athlete, is it appropriate for a coach to touch me like that? Especially we're talking the sports like gymnastics or where coaches have to be physical. And athletes must know what's right and wrong, because how are they going to know? So they all do it. And you do not go on that plane with Team South Africa or on the bus with Team South Africa unless you pass. So we definitely, from a SASCOC perspective, have implemented it. And the national federations, it's rolling out. It's taking time. It was November 2019 where the safeguarding policy was voted in by the General Council at SASCOC. And now we're sitting where we now, April 2022, saying, where's your policies? Where's your policies? So it is taking time, but we have made huge inroads. I mean, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, we've done over 5,000 now clearances. We've got about 800 DSOs or something around the country. I did some figures for Parliament not so long ago. So we've made positive inroads, but we need to up our game, some more.
We're almost at 3,000 DSOs around the country, and as far as clearances go, and I think we must give that context. So firstly, let's be aware that 3,000 DSOs through every sport in the country is minimal. But to give it context, once the policy was developed in 2019, 3 months later, the world went into lockdown. And so nobody actually did anything for almost a year. So we're now talking about the start of 2021. In the last 14 months, we have upskilled nearly 3,000 DSOs. When it comes to SAC and clearances, we're now knocking on about 15,000 around the country. So we're sitting in a place, and the other thing that's interesting to note is that it's not a case of in 15 months, we've done like 1,000 a month. It was 15 or 20 in the first month. And every month, the number that we do is significantly bigger than the month before. So it's almost the power of compound interest, if we want to be funny about it. But there are spaces where I will stand around a bra and I will go, this happened in South Africa. And I'm not really happy that has happened because I'm South African. But I will certainly say that in the sports safeguarding space, and I'm someone who engages at sometimes international webinars where I'm talking with people from various countries. I am super proud of how we as South Africa, as SASCOC, as the federations, as the DSOs have driven this forward. I think there is a heart for us to do better. And I think as South Africans, this is becoming an extremely big mountain that we are overcoming. Kim, back in the very first DSO course, I mean, when we look at DSO numbers, I think Kim is like in the top 10. I think that's how early she did DSO. I think she was like one of the first 10 in the country to have a DSO course behind her. And where we are today, from where that teed off, she was scared back then, but I think the fear is still there. But I think looking in strategically, there is a light at the end of that tunnel. There is an end game. There is a place where we as South Africa are going to be able to proudly stand on that safeguarding pedestal. I believe that, and I believe it's because there are the right people driving this. That's my opinion. Okay.
I don't see another hand, so I'm going to talk quickly about what you triggered earlier on.
Yes.
Just in you know, I also work for a living, you know, so I do sporting events, and I have found to drive home the message of safeguarding, an event safeguarding officer. So when I host a tournament, and I do tournaments around schools countrywide, we talk, our MCs on the mic, and they talk about an event safeguarding officer if you want anything. And that is a phenomenal way of advertising it to youngsters, to get them to understand safeguarding. So if you're doing any of your club champs or anything, talk about it. Say whoever is the designated safeguarding officer, you got anything, you go talk to them, or WhatsApp number or anything like that. So if you want to, it's a great way of spreading the word of safeguarding at events. And I mean, look, it's a long-term goal of mine to have event safeguarding officers at every single event. I mean, you know, we have had cases of incidents at Byron USA. We have there was an incident at a USA tournament. You know, so and obviously spectators. You know, as soon as we start talking in those circles, we get spectators at the events. We've got alcohol flowing. You know, COVID. Everyone's been forgetting about it now. You know, we have to have that safeguarding environment. So events is a great place to promote safeguarding. So just something that Mark said earlier that reminded me of that. So I've just jumped in there, Mark. Sorry.
No, absolutely. We welcome, you know, we welcome your wisdoms. Guys, to that end, the end of last year, we did the AUSC games, the Region 5 games. We were the safeguarding partner in that space. And what we did is we started with a safeguarding mascot. There is a guardian safeguarding mascot. And what it does is it just creates the conversation. I'm going to say to everybody, if you have got nationals, if you've got provincials, and you have got vulnerable athletes in significance, let us know. You know, as your safeguarding partner, we're very comfortable to be there. We'll have the mascot there. There are people that want to take pictures with this big ass mascot. There's a whole story behind it that we can tell the kids. You know, this is where safeguarding came from, and this is the and there really is kind of a place where, unless we get to a point where safeguarding is an acceptable conversation, it's going to always be the thing that we don't really want to talk about. And we can't be in that space. We have to talk about it. Sexual harassment happens. Sexual assault happens. It is not okay that it happens, but it's more not okay that we don't talk about it. So if you have got an MC, ask them to drop in a couple of lines about it. I think that's phenomenal, Kim. If there is a way that you're, you know, before you start coaching with little ones, you know, get the coaches just to drop in something. Hey guys, be safe, or be safe online, or make sure you know your, you know, don't walk with strangers, stranger danger, good touch, bad touch. Any of those basics, let's just, wherever possible, disseminate that information. Okay. Has anybody got any other questions that they may want to ask of Kim? And Kim did mention that we had Patience here. For those of you who don't know, she's the COO, if I'm not mistaken, at SASCOC. So she is very engaged in the operational side of the day-to-day. So if there's anybody that has any questions, I don't know if she is still with us, but if she is, I'm sure she would be happy to respond. Okay.
All right, dinner time for everyone.
Guys, I want to thank everybody. I just want to mention that, and this will go out on the DSO groups, so just be aware. Just to be clear, and it's not something that I've encumbered any of our DSOs with any of the DSO courses, but I think I just want to give you a little bit of context around what next month's topic is. So within the underbelly of sport, there are three pillars, three significant pillars. One is your SAIDs and your water and your drug side. The second is your safeguarding. And the third is integrity. And integrity is different from the safeguarding space. It's not safeguarding. It's also obviously not the SAID side. It talks into things like gambling. It talks into the integrity of sport, because when we allow the integrity to slip, we by default create an environment that becomes dangerous. The failure to address integrity allows for things like trafficking. It allows for things like drugs. It allows for inappropriate behavior to come in. And the guy who is almost head of the southern region in integrity is going to join us next month. He has a harrowing story. He personally went through a story that will knock your socks off, to the point that he started in a small football club in one of our neighboring African countries and ended up playing in an English football league in Premier League division. And as a result of everything he's been through, his experience, he plays a significant role in this integrity. And in as much as there isn't an exam, in as much as integrity isn't necessarily something that we are driving right now, it certainly is on the horizon. And as a DSO, being aware of it would be extremely valuable. So if you are here as a national president, if you are here as a DSO from a provincial region, or even from a district, we will be pushing out the information about the next DSO course, but I encourage you to encourage your DSOs, your clubs, your presidents, your people, your club chairpersons to come and listen, because knowing this side of sport is as valuable as knowing how to coach. I really, really do believe that. Okay. Guys, thank you all much for your time. Kim, thank you so much for giving up your time. I know you're very busy down there in Cape Town. At least you're not, you may be there for canoeing, but we're all really paddling here in KZN with all the rain.
I've got water here. I'm so excited.
I know that there were some people that wanted to stick around at the end and just ask some more specific questions. I did see that on the chat. So if you do want to have a one-on-one, or you want to ask something, that's away from everybody else, I'll stick around. Otherwise, thank you very much, and to everybody, and have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.